All right, I'm going to talk about what we've done for the last year. But first, so I'll do that in the President's report. Then I'll do the Treasurer's report. Kathy Burns will do the Secretary's report. We'll have our elections. And Dick Hawes will then talk about Rufus Porter. So I'm going to talk about the Community Preservation Grant. A community grant, which is different. All the fundraising we've been doing, the displays that we have on the Clara Sexton House now, other activities and the goals for next year. The current community preservation grant that we have, that we got from the town, is the third one that we've received in the last 5 or 6 years. The first one, we restored all the windows and repainted the house and did a lot of repairs on the house too. It was rotten wood. The second one was was $150,000 or more, and we restored the barn. We added air conditioning, heat, and all our displays in the barn are in the barn now. Prior to that, we had a 150-year-old barn or more than that, and it had a lot of stuff in it. A lot of stuff. So this one, we got a grant to put a patio in, and I'll show you that. A stone wall. We put stairs to the barn basement, did weed removal around the barn, repairs to the bathroom ceiling, the restoration of the second floor bedroom, not the Clara Sexton bedroom, but the other one. And we're going to replace the barn basement door, that's being done this fall, and repair the outside back wall of the barn. So this right here is this is the colonial kitchen here. This is the modern kitchen from 1900. And that's the way it looked last year. And this is the way it looks now. We put in, all the pavers were put in, and the stone wall was put in, and we moved a few other things around. And it's a nice place that we can, sit out there. And this is Dick standing down by the barn basement door. And if you can tell, that's quite a slope going down there. And this is the way it looks now. We put stairs in with the handrail.
Oh, that's nice.
And and at some point we might be able to put some displays down in the barn. You know, that remains to be seen. But we have a sleigh that used to be in the barn, and we could have that displayed when we do the open house. This is the upstairs bedroom. This is to be floor. You can't really tell too much, but it needed a lot of work on the ceiling and the walls, primarily. And so we had those all redone. And then you can see the bedroom that we have over the past year that was all set up with the trundle bed underneath there. I mean, this was what the ceiling in the bathroom looked like. And that's what it looks like now. Over the years, what I hope happens is we apply for more community preservation grants about things that needs to be restored in the house. And as long as you say restored, I think we'll get a grant. I think the Community Preservation Committee in the town have been happy with us because we've done everything we've said we're going to do on all our grants, and we've stayed within budget. This is the barn door that's going to be replaced, as you can see. Critters can get in there. And I don't have a photograph of the back of the barn, but the back of the barn needs repair. Our contractor they've been using for most of the work on the barn, Robert Scott, he's going to do the back of the barn. And I think, he started that?
Yeah, water potty's over there now.
Yeah, I saw that. And so that will either be finished this fall or it'll be finished in the spring. And once we get that door, we'll be finished with that grant. And one of the things that happened is when we realized the back of the barn had to be repaired, is we had the grant and we didn't have quite enough money. And we found out from the planning department that from our first grant, there was $5,000 that we didn't spend. And they said we could spend it now. So we talked with the planning department, with Jane, who's in there, and put us in touch with Amit, who's the new town treasurer, and Dick talked to Mitt and got $5,000. Okay, community grants are different. Community grants are money that the town gets from various companies that got tax breaks from the town. And then these companies donate money back to the town, and different community groups can apply to get a grant. And these grants are usually from maybe $1,000 to $3,000 or $4,000. And they have usually about $50,000 a year to give out. So we had a love seat donated by Jean Bushnell, who just retired from the COA last year, and had been in her husband's family since 1870 approximately. So we got a grant to reupholster the love seat. And I might say too, is just as an aside before I show you the love seat, if you realize what happened the past week, we were going to be at the Bennett, and we didn't know where we were going until Tuesday. I talked to Hamali Shah, who's the director here, and asked her if we could use this place, and she said yes. So we had a place to go, because this was Tuesday of this week. So that's the love seat that was given to us. And that's what it looks like now, and it's in the front parlor. Fundraising. It's been a successful year on fundraising. The gift shop has done very well this year. We'll talk about that. The Dining to Donate has done very well this year. The Vintage Tea does well every year. And we were at the Farmers Market in Yankee Doodle. And we have the pavers this year. And we'll talk about all of these. And that's done very well. Nancy Sheffer handles our gift shop. And these are the T-shirts like I have on now that we've been selling. And I don't know how many we sold this year, but it must be close to 100. And Bob sold 25 by himself, Bob Kinsman. But that's been a very big fundraiser for us. We've done very well by it. And these are some of the other things that we sell, including all our books that we have. And we've actually had to reorder some of the books again because we sold them all. And this is a book that we got this year. This was Billerica snapshots that Diane Douglas put together for the time capsule that we just sealed. And so we made up a number of them, and we're selling them now. And they're selling pretty good. Of course, we're selling them for more than it costs us to make them. Now, the Dining to Donate, Michelle is taking care of that, and we've had 3 this year. Garrison's, Casablanca, and Jade Pacific, and all of them did very well. And we also did raffles at, I think, at least 2 of them. And that brought in additional money. But we brought in a lot more money this year than we did last year on the Dining to Donates.
And one of the reasons that we've been doing so well is because of the people who are coming. And I'd just like to recognize somebody who has done a really nice job calling people and getting people to come. That's Roz. What do we have, like a table of 32 at one point? So ask one.
Right. Yeah, there's Roz. She's celebrating at Casablanca. She has a good time. Okay, and the Vintage Tea, and there's Roz in the front.
Oh, yeah. With
But-
the table of friends.
Yeah, she brought that whole table. But we had that in the Bennett, and we've had it in the Bennett for many years, and hopefully next spring we can go back there, but who knows. But that brings in about $1,500 roughly, net for us every year. From my understanding, the Bennett had water get into their electrical box, causing a short. The fire department came over. I don't know if there was a fire or not, but they took care of it. But since it's not a town building, they didn't do anything more than disconnect the power. And the power's been disconnected, I think, for at least 2 weeks. And we haven't been able to contact anybody. That's why we were looking for another facility. Okay, we were at Yankee Doodle this year, and it didn't rain. It was a nice day.
Yeah.
We sold a lot of T-shirts and
Books.
books, and we sold a lot of these, I think, too. And this is actually a picture from last year, but we were at Farmers Market at the beginning of August. I neglected to take a photo this year, so I just used last year's picture. But that's good. And one of the things we do, besides selling everything, we try to promote the Historical Society and what we do to people. And then we have the pavers. We started selling those this year. We started talking about it last year. And Michelle is sort of organizing the whole thing. And we're selling the pavers for $100 each. And that's something like $80, almost 80 is profit. And so that works out well for the Historical Society. And if you notice outside here and outside the library, they have the similar type things, the pavers and the walkways. And that's done very well for us. This is the walkway to the doctor's office. And I don't know if you can see, but some of the bricks are in there with the names on them. And I think we've sold about 25 now or something on that order. Diane Douglas is now our curator. So we'll talk about some of our current displays. One of my friends, Frank Bushalaki, sort of lent us all this, everything. He was in Vietnam and was in the Marines. And this is all his medals and stuff that he brought back with him. So we've had that on display all year. We'll probably have it for another month, and then it's going back to him. But it's interesting thing is Frank is here as a kid, staying beside John Wayne when he was over in Vietnam. We have a case with all the Bennett Library information from the Bennett family. And that's the same family that basically donated the Bennett Library to the town, where the Bennett Cultural Center, which has had all these problems. It's privately owned. I don't know the name of the person. I don't think that person who owns it lives in the state, but there's an association that's supposed to maintain it, and I think, and I'm not 100% sure, but I think they're all older than we are, which means they're old. Right? And they have problems having people to respond, to take care of things. It's an issue I hope somebody helps gets resolved, because winter is coming and pipes could freeze and whatnot. We have postcards on loan from Kevin Murphy, the Martha Hill Sage collection. And these displays are being rotated, and sort of Diane's coordinating all of that.
Winter.
And then we've had wedding dresses.
It's Harry Richardson's, the dark one. That's Dave.
And there's actually more than shown here.
Yes, that's only half of them.
Yeah. And they'll be here for the rest of the year. And so we've been having open houses, generally the first Sunday of the month. We start in April and go through December, although the first one in April, we had that closer to Patriots' Day. And the December one will be the same day as the tree lighting in the center. We bought some new flags this year. Dick coordinated that. And there was a flag out front with 13 stars. Now, Rich does facilities and maintains everything in the house. And he was down in the basement. Yeah. Well, he was down in the basement one time, and this was a waste pipe, and you can see it's all what it looked like.
Wasted away?
Yeah, wasted away. But he took care of getting it fixed. The house is a little over 300 years old. And we have a web page that Rick Manley set up with us, but he's no longer with us. So Isaac Wright-Lichter from BATV has agreed to take over our website. So I let Rick know that Isaac will be contacting him. And so to figure out what needs to be done, I think Rick had purchased some software. We have licenses that go for another 6 or 8 months or whatever. So when Isaac takes over, he'll figure out what has to be done. And one of the things Isaac is going to do at some point is be able to hook up links with the BATV, because we have enough talks and whatnot, and presentations like this one that are on the BATV website, so they can be able to access them from our website. And Alex, he does historical research for us. And this happens to be something recent. I didn't know, but we had a trolley that went underneath the railroad, and somebody hit the marker that we had up there. And so hopefully we're going to get it all replaced, but I go by this every day, and I didn't know it was there. It's on Concord Road, and I'm not sure exactly on Concord Road, but it's probably where the train, yeah, and one of the interesting, I know the rails to trail, they're going to put the bike trail. Is it going to go through that same place? So I don't know if the bike trail's going through there or not. But Alex does a lot of research for us. Mary Jones has agreed to take over our membership and get everything straightened out and attract a couple hundred new members. So, and this picture is also from last year, because I didn't take one this year. But they do cataloging every Friday afternoon. This has been going on for years. But by cataloging, besides eating, they, as artifacts are given to us, they log them in with the computer software that we have, and they can cross-reference it. So if you want to find information on a particular thing or a person or whatnot, it will cross-reference all the artifacts that we have, say, for that person, and let us know where they are. Our goals are really pretty much like they were before. We're going to complete the community preservation grant, and that could be this year. But hopefully we apply for another community grant. I think we should apply for one every year, because the way they've been doing it, everybody who applies gets some money. You might not get the full amount, but you get some money. We'll continue with the PAVA fundraiser, it's been very good. We'll be doing something for the 250th anniversary. I don't know exactly what we'll be doing, but Michelle, who's on the 250th committee, probably will get us involved, is getting us involved.
Yeah, I was going to say, you haven't mentioned your walking tour.
Oh yeah, I've given a couple walking tours because Michelle said, how about doing a walking tour? And she hasn't taken no for an answer.
Fabulous.
And then we'll continue with the other things we do, the dining to donate, the open houses, the vintage tea, the cataloging, all the other things that we've been doing. Okay, so I'm going to do the treasurer's report. You can see we have more money than we did last year at this time. Now, some of the money that we have, like in the checking accounts, whatnot, that includes grant money. There may be several thousand of grant money still in there, but it's still in the check. So we are solvent. Now, one of the things that we try to do, or one of the goals that we always have, is to be in the black every year. We have operating expenses, and we'd like to bring in enough income on a yearly basis to cover the operating expenses. And I'd say in the last several years, we haven't been doing that. We're always a little bit less, so we're eating into savings, but the savings are growing, so but this year was a good year. Now, there's a lot of numbers on here, but this is last year at this time, and this year, if you just look at the bottom line, last year, the income was around $7,000. This year, it's over $14,000. And with the dues went up, the contributions went up, but if you look at the fundraisers, they really went up, and the gift shop really went up.
Well, that's
And-
good. You got a good shop.
Yeah, so that's helped us out a lot, to be like that. And these were just budgets that we have and what the differences were. And these were just numbers that I kind of picked up, made up.
They look good.
Yeah. But in any case, we did very well this year. And if you look at, our goal this year was $8,300, and we got $14,800. So the insurance went up, not much actually, less than we thought it was going to go up. but the utilities are up quite a bit. Partly for what you're saying, but we've had the bond for a couple of years, I think just electric and gas. Now, the next three, there's numbers, I categorized these myself, which was probably not the way Kerry did it last year, because she was treasurer at the time. But if you look them in the aggregate, this is the postage, the office supplies, the maintenance of the Sexton House, and miscellaneous. This adds up to like $4,600, $4,700. Over here, it adds up to about $5,500. So that went up somewhat too. So in total, we went from $11,800 to $14,300 in what we spent. There we go. Now, but in balance, we had income of $14,800, and our expenses were $14,300. So we were on the good by over $500. And I think we haven't been in the good like that on the plus side for a number of years. But it's because of all the fundraising and the gift shop, doing much better than we expected. Thank you. The minutes.
I'm Kathy Burns. These are the minutes from last year's meeting. The 128th annual meeting of the Billerica Historical Society took place on Sunday, October 27th, 2024 at 1 p.m. at the Bennett Library. 30 people attended in the in-person meeting. An Italian meal catered by Lakash's Deli in Burlington was enjoyed by all. President John Bartlett called the annual meeting to order at 2 p.m. He presented a PowerPoint of what has been accomplished over the past year, as well as his hopes for 2024. Secretary Diane Douglas read the minutes of the 2023 annual meeting. The minutes were approved as read. Treasurer Carrie Sullivan presented the treasurer's report. The report was approved as read. Carrie stepped down as treasurer. The slate of officers was presented for approval and was approved by unanimous vote. The officers include President John Bartlett, Vice President Richard Hawes, Treasurer Richard Manley, Secretary H. Catherine Burns, Director Diane Douglas, Director Alec Ingraham, Director Mary Jones, Director Richard Knickie, Director Michelle DeParisis. Following the election, John Bartlett spoke about some of the various items that will be included in the 2024 time capsule. BATV recorded the meeting. Respectfully submitted, Diane Douglas, outgoing secretary.
All right, we're going to do the elections now. This is the slate of offices. Dick Hawes is going to be running for president. Our bylaws say a president can only be president for 6 years, and this is the end of my 6th year. So I'm going to run for vice president. Treasurer Kerry Sullivan's coming back. And then the secretary, Kathy Burns. The board of directors, Diane Douglas, Alex Ingraham, Mary Jones, Rich Knickie, and Michelle DeParisis. Are there any other nominations? Would someone like to move to accept this slate of officers? And then we vote. All in favor? Aye. These are the new
Did you
directors.
approve the minutes?
Or treasurer's report.
And the treasurer's report.
Okay, we'll do that.
I move to accept the treasurer's report.
All in favor?
Aye. I move to accept the secretary's report.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Very good. So the next thing is, Dick's going to talk about Rufus Porter.
So I didn't have a fancy PowerPoint or anything, so I just have photographs. But to get started, I assume everybody in the room is familiar with Rufus Porter. He's a guy that I've always kind of been interested in. I knew about him since I was a teenager. I grew up in Bedford. At one point, when I was probably in junior high school, there was the big news around town was that they discovered a Rufus Porter mural in the Monroe House. And I didn't know anything about it, so after hearing people talk, it kind of intrigued me. And at the library, which I frequented a lot, I found, it might have been this book, I don't know, but I found some information on Rufus Porter, and I found out what it was all about with the murals, and once again, it intrigued me to look for more information. But in the 60s, there wasn't that much information available. So I started doing some, digging, and I kind of forgot about him for many years, and then it kind of came up again. And since then, I've been very, very interested in him. What really shocked me was when I found out that he was a resident of Billerica for 20 years. He was a legal resident. And when I first knew about him, I didn't know where he lived or where he was from or any of that. But this is very interesting to live in the same town that Rufus Porter lived in. Where did he live? I don't know where he lived. He didn't own a house, so there are no tax records. But he did rent a couple of houses in town, at least one house in town. And I wasn't able to find through, and I didn't dig deep into it, but through the research that I did, I found two sources that said, one, he lived by Content Brook near the Middlesex Canal, which would make it East Billerica. And another one said he lived near the Concord River, on the Concord River near the Middlesex Canal, which would make it North Billerica. And so one of those is maybe wrong, but they both could be right, because he lived here for 20 years, and he and his wife had 7 children in Billerica. So at some point he might have wanted a larger house. So, but the one thread that ran through it was the Middlesex Canal. And I found that very intriguing, because he worked with publishers in Boston, and he also worked with a publisher in Concord, New Hampshire. And the best way in the 1820s, 1830s to get to Concord, New Hampshire was from the Middlesex Canal to the Merrimack River and north to Concord. And that would be certainly the easiest, smoothest way. And so I'm certainly convinced that he probably used the Middlesex Canal as a means of transportation, which is kind of interesting, being associated with the Middlesex Canal Association as well, that there's that connection there. And I do know that he didn't specify what it was, but it was a first-hand account that he was writing about his inventions. And he said at one time he wasted $500 on an invention for canal boats, and he didn't express what it was. But there again, it must have come to mind as he was a passenger on the Middlesex Canal. So he was born actually in Massachusetts in 1792 in Boxford. And at an early age, his family moved up to Maine, but remember at that time that was a territory of Massachusetts. And they moved up to an area called Pleasant Mountain, which has a different, I think it could be Denmark, Maine now, but it's up, just a little.
His home's in Bridgeton.
Well, the house now the museum is in Bridgeton, but he didn't live in Bridgeton. It was near Bridgeton, but it was in that area. And he did his schooling, his elementary schooling, which is all they had, was in Freiburg Academy. And I don't know if you've ever been in the Freiburg area, but it's a beautiful area, and it sits up kind of high, and it gives you the overlook of the valleys down past near Conway, and in the distance you can see Mount Washington. And back in the 1830s, I mean, in the early part of the 19th century, the fields would have been clearer than they are now, because a lot of the wood was cut down for lumber and fuel. So you get those vistas of the nice rolling farm fields. And so you look at the paintings that he did later in his life, and it really brings to mind where he grew up and where he lived, because that's the same type of vistas that he painted. Some of the early books, like this one in particular, she herself was a pioneer, Rufus Porter, Yankee pioneer, and she was one of the first to delve into his life to any extent. Unfortunately, there's a lot of mistakes in the book. There was no internet, and information in the 60s was hard to come by. She did a good job, but there are some errors in the book, so if you do read that book or look through it, don't take everything verbatim. Like one of the things in the book, she mentioned that he went on a tour to the South Pacific, and when he came back from the South Pacific tour, that gave him the inspiration to do some wall murals with volcanoes with smoke coming out of them, banana trees, and this type of stuff. He didn't do that, and those were paintings that were done by other artists, and that's one of the problems with Rufus Porter and his wall murals. There was very few that were signed, or that they have actual evidence that were done by him. His paintings, his wall mural paintings, became very popular, and there were a lot of imitators and a lot of people, and he actually had two family members that helped him with paintings that also did them on their own. His son, Stephen T. Porter, and his nephew, Jonathan Poor, and there are a lot of murals around by Jonathan Poor, and they're very similar. But you see a slight difference, and it hasn't been until just recently where they've been able, there's a whole center for wall painted preservation up in Hollowell, Maine, and they've been doing a lot of research on the paintings, mural paintings, and they've been able to discern which ones were basically Rufus Porter or which ones were done by others, and a lot of them they don't even really know who it was. He became a shoemaker's apprentice in Maine, and this is just the beginning of a life full of varied occupations and interests. I mean, his mind was nonstop. And so that was in 1807. In 1815, he married Eunice Twombly, and the next year, his son Stephen, who I just mentioned, was born. And when he was in Maine, just before the outbreak of the War of 1812, he joined the Portland Light Infantry, and that's what's represented in this painting here. This was not done by him. This was done by another artist. But it shows the infantry and encampment and training in Portland. And you see a tower there. And that tower is on Munjay Hill in Portland, Maine. And that tower is still there. It's been restored, and you can go up in it. And everybody thinks it's a lighthouse. And he used this as an item in a lot of his murals. And everybody still thinks they're lighthouses, but it's not. It's an observation tower. And the reason they needed one in Portland, well, they wanted one in Portland because it was right on Casco Bay, and Casco Bay is just filled with islands. You can't see directly out to sea. And the ship owners, the merchants, would like to know when their ships were returning from their voyages. So they'd fly a flag that would specify the company. It would be different colors and different geometric shapes that could be seen with the telescope. And you can see there at the top of the tower, there are flags stuck up, and that means that the observer has observed ships from this merchant that are entering the harbor, so they can get crews together to unload the ships and have a speedy turnaround, making more money. But there again, that's another item that obviously stuck in Rufus's mind and shows up in his paintings. Another one that when he was a child in Maine that he really enjoyed doing is his father had a lot of acreage up there, and he had a large farm. But Rufus, when he was a child, loved to go taking a skiff, which is like a small rowboat with a sail, and this is it here. And that was one of his pleasures, was to float around on the rivers and the ponds around that area of Maine, around Freiburg. And this almost became a signature to his paintings. This shows up in many of his paintings. That one there is actually life-size from one of the murals. Around 1816, it was just before he moved to Billerica, he was living in Cambridge, and he got into painting miniatures. And miniatures had become wildly popular by the middle of the 19th century. And there were many artists that did them. And with his natural artistic skill, he decided to get into that as well. And this is one of his first ones. This is from the Lane family, one of the children from the Lane family in Portland, Maine. And people really wanted to have pictures or portraits of their loved ones. This is an actual one from the 19th century. This isn't not a Rufus Porter, but this is what it is. You can pass it around if you want to look at it. That got him going. It also got him into the publishing business. and he became friends with a publisher in Boston. As I said later, there was one in Concord, New Hampshire. I've seen clips from newspapers of the time where he'd advertise that on such and such a day he would be at a tavern, and you could come in, and he guaranteed the likeness for a portrait for $2 or a frontal portrait for $3. And he went around as an itinerant painter, and he undoubtedly hand decorated the frame this is in, because we've seen it on other of his products that he made over the years. But one of the tricks that he used, well, I wouldn't say a trick, but what he used was called a camera obscura. And you see here at the bottom, there's a big box, and you'd have the subject sit in front of a background where the silhouette was very evident. And through a series of lenses and mirrors, the one the porter uses is probably like the one at the top, which would have been more portable. But if you can see, the artist on the bottom has her right hand inside the box. She could look through the viewer on the top and actually see the profile and trace the profile. And then the artist could just fill in the details and paint it with a watercolor. And so you're able to do accurate portraits very quickly. And Rufus probably did these. There again, he never signed. He wasn't a bookkeeper. He didn't keep any records of anything. And but we're just guessing that he did at least more than 1,000 of the miniature portraits. Even when he was doing the murals, he still offered to do murals and miniature portraits. And that was in vogue until about the 1850s, when photography took over. And it's kind of interesting, around the 1850s, there's kind of a famous photograph of a woman with 2 children, obviously her children, and they're sitting there and they have their portrait being photographed while they're holding a miniature portrait of the husband, who evidently had passed away. So you had it kind of shows the transition between these miniature portraits and photographs. This is one of the better ones that he did. This is more typical. This is a double one. This would have been a $4 portrait. And you can see now the frames have been upgraded. He purchased the frame. This was later in his portrait career. And you can see that everything has been upgraded since the simpler ones of 1816. So that was an interesting part of his life that continued into the 1840s. Another thing that he got into through the publishing, he became friendly with the publishers in Boston. And this was another thing that was kind of all the rage at that time period, was a family register. And you could people would love to hang these on the walls. You'd fill in your name and your children's name, and it became a family record of you and your family. But more important, it was something that you could hang on your wall and identify yourselves. You can make out the frame a little bit, and you can see that it was like the early frame that he did in 1816. And so he made many of these. And this was about the time he moved to Billerica. When they did the census in 1820, he was a resident of Cambridge, but by the end of the year, nobody knows exactly what time. So it was either by the end of 1820 or the beginning of 1821, he moved to Billerica, and he stayed here for 40 years. Another thing that he did that people were very much interested in, some people kind of chastised him for it. This was his almanac. And this was kind of pushing the state of the art of printing and paper cutting of the day. And you can see this is quite a bit bigger, but it's referred to as a let me see, I have it written down here. It's a volvel. And volvels became very popular even into the early 20th century. And basically a volvel was something that you could spin. It was like a calculator or something that you would turn, and you could line things up and it would give you answers or give you information. And so Rufus invented this one. And if you look at it, it's kind of complicated to use. Down here you have, over in this area here, you have the centuries, and down here you have the years within the centuries, and you line those up and it gives you what he calls Dominical letters. And up here are the Dominical letters. So after you figure that out, you can rotate, the inside rotate where the horse is. And the horse is there because it's probably springtime, or is it, does it say spring? I don't forget what it says, but there's 4 seasons, and it gives you all, up here it gives you all the days of the month and the order that they're in. And if you look around, there's the number of hours of light and sunrise and sunset. And there was one newspaper editor was very critical of him, saying people are wasting 50 cents to find out when their birthday is going to be 1,000 years from now. You know? So not everybody was in favor of it, but they were wildly popular, and he went through 3 printings of these Wavels. And this was about the time that he transitioned. He was living in Billerica when he did this, by the way. And this is about the time he transitioned into the murals. But the funny thing with Porter was his mind was always, he was an inventor, and he invented so many items, more than we'll ever know, literally. And I say that because in 1838, and then again about 20 years later, the United States Patent Office burned to the ground. And it took with it thousands and thousands of patent models, almost 1 million patents and patent applications. And it was after the second one, of course, they decided they better make a fireproof building. But in the process, a lot of original patents were lost. And as I said, Rufus wasn't a very good bookkeeper. So we don't know a lot of what he did. When his son Stephen got a little bit older, he was an apprentice at a clock maker in Concord. And Rufus saw the clocks and figured that he could make a mechanism that was a little better. So he actually did, but he never went into the clock making. That was the other problem with Rufus. He wasn't a businessman, he was an inventor. And he would sell maybe his patents, or other people would take his ideas or whatever, or he'd just do one-offs just to see that if he could do it and if it was better. And there was something, I don't know what it was in particular, but there was something about this clock mechanism that's better than the rest. This clock actually got these pictures off a Skinner auction about 15 years ago, and it was sold privately to a person in Andover. And the clock sold actually at that time. Rufus hadn't been back in style enough yet. It really actually sold for reasonable money. I'll say probably about $3,000 to $5,000. And now today it would be almost invaluable, really, because the interest in Rufus Porter has really gained traction again. One of his other business inventions that he made, and this is while he was in Billerica, was the revolving rifle. He worked with a gunsmith in Boston, and he came up with a model. He called it the revolving rifle. And everybody says, well, he sold the patent to Samuel Colt. Well, he didn't really sell the patent. He never patented this. But he sold the model and the manufacturing rights to Samuel Colt for $100. And of course, Samuel Colt turned it into a $1 million business. And so this was done while he lived in Billerica. So as he was painting, I mean, he was still, his mind, he told people, your mind should never rest. I mean, if there's something, push it into a corner and go on to something else. And, you know, it should always be something new turning over. And he really lived by that rule. So to try and put things in chronological order is almost impossible because he had so many things going on simultaneously. This is kind of an interesting one, and I don't know if you'll be able to read it, but this one also down the bottom says Billerica, Mass, right down here. And this was called the sensitive fire alarm. And it was a box, and it was powered by a clock spring mechanism that rang a bell. And I'm not sure what triggered it. I mean, I couldn't find any explanation. The actual patent number for this, the patent was destroyed, but the actual patent number for this was 1915. And so you try doing any research on it, you get all the patents from 1915. So I couldn't find anything specific about this. This is the mural. This is a mural from a house. I consider it his most famous mural, and there's a couple of reasons. Because the way that it's set up artistically, this is just one wall, remember. This went around 4 walls, up a staircase, and around a hallway upstairs. And this is from the Francis Howe house in Westwood, which at the time he painted it was West Dedham. And the ones I like about this, and he mentioned this in his book, he put instructions for wall painting in some of his early publications. And he always mentioned that the colors should be vivid and bright. And when people tend to think of Rufus Porter murals, they don't picture that because many of them have been so old, they've been wallpapered over, the wallpaper's been taken off, some of the paint's gone with it, and they've just weathered over 200 years. And but these were in exceptional condition. This house was torn down, And when they tore it down, they went to great pains to be able to stabilize all the walls that a painting was on, remove all those walls. They were stored at the Rufus Porter Museum in Bridgeton, Maine, and they've just recently gone on display. They actually got another house, had it moved to where their museum is, and they've put these walls appropriately within the house so you get an idea of how they looked in their natural setting, which I haven't been there, but to see the photographs is breathtaking. This is like the hallmark of it. But as far as I'm concerned, this is the hallmark of his wall paintings. Now, as I said, there were other people that copied that because it became known as the Rufus Porter School of painting, because there were so many imitators and so many other people that were doing it, making a good living off of being an itinerant painter. And most of Porter's paintings were in Massachusetts, New Hampshire, some in Maine, some in Vermont. But it was basically in the New England area. I guess there's a couple in New York. So he would be gone for quite a bit of time, but he'd always be back to Billerica. As I said, he had 7 children in Billerica, so he had to spend some time there. So he had Stephen Twombly, his son Stephen Twombly Porter, helped him on this mural. And this is one they can identify because they were signed by both people. So what I do sometimes is when I paint these, I go through books of Rufus Porter's paintings, and I can find areas that might be suitable for a painting to stand on its own. And I can copy some of that. And you can purchase stencils, because having the stencil is important, because Rufus Porter used stencils too, because you remember he was doing this for a living. So he had, time was money. And I think the stencils are great because they give it almost an abstract sort of view. If they were freehand, all the foliage, everything else is freehand, but the stencils give you that stark, basic, primitive type painting reality, which I kind of like. This one too, you can also see on the right-hand side here, there's a steamboat. So steamboats started showing up in some of his later paintings. And as I said, the paintings would normally, unless the owner didn't want to, but they'd normally be on all the walls of a room. And one of the walls would have an ocean or a lake on it. And that was called the water wall, for good reason. And so always on his water walls, there would be ships and frigates with American flags, or in this case, when later on, into getting closer to 1840.
What year was this done, do you know?
1838.
1838, thank you.
So this is one of his later ones. And you can see the steamboat here. So the whole thing gives, the idea, the prevailing idea of the country was this prosperous. We had become so prosperous, and we were able to indulge in things like having painted walls, and the furniture was a little fancier, and you could spend some money to have portraits of your family. Life had changed drastically since we became a nation in 1889. The Constitution was ratified, and now we're here just 50 years later, and things have totally changed in the country, and it's really speeding forward. There are new inventions coming out by the dozens every day. So it was kind of it seems to me it would have been a great time to be around and see all that. One of Rufus's ideas that he had while he was here in Billerica, this is 1820, and he went on for the rest of his life, was an aerial, he called it an aerial steamship. It would have been powered by steam. And this is one invention that he had that he really tried to follow through on. He actually created a company called the Aerial Navigation Company. He tried to sell stock, didn't work. You can see this here, this one advertises. So this was done after the gold rush in California, and then people wanted to get from the East Coast to the West Coast. It would take them months, go around the Horn on a sail ship. He figured you could get to California on one of his airships in a week. So, I mean, there was some, there was a lot of logic to it, but it never worked out. He tried to get investors to help him build a model, even just a smaller model, a proof of concept type model. He couldn't really make that happen. He was close a couple times, but it never really happened. But that was the one driving thing in his life that really never came to anything, was the aerial steamship. But you can see how inventive his mind was. Getting back to the wall murals, okay, there's a couple different. He would ask at the request of the owner, he could do what they call a gazelle. A gazelle painting is basically a monochrome painting, And so you'll see a lot of those. I think the Joel Blaine House has one of those murals, which is all monocolor. And monocolor is very difficult to do. I remember, I did one as a child a long time ago, and to me it was very difficult. But because colors, you could use colors to separate items very easily. Well, if you're doing a monochrome, it's not so easy. You got to really be aware. So he basically did gray. He would change colors at the request of the owner of the house. But there's actually one house where he has a combination of both on the same wall, which is kind of interesting. And through the 1820s, 1840s, these kind of fell out of style by going into the 1850s. And so this is one that probably predates the 1838 one by a small amount, but it's the same. You get the same idea, and you see the observation tower up on the hill here, which shows up in a lot of his painting. Down here is the man in the skiff. It's hard to see; it looks like a shadow, but those are his iconic motifs that were in a lot of his paintings. You see the steamboat, which would place it towards the end of his wall painting career. But the reason I show you that is you're going to look at his nephew, one very similar that was done by his nephew, Jonathan Poor. Now this one's on the same idea, but this is his nephew, Jonathan Poor. And you can see the difference. You can see the difference in the foliage. There's a man down here who's shooting a gun. The man in the skiff is a little bit different. He's got the observation tower, so he's copying his uncle. And you can see the ship with the flags, and gives the busy harbor scene. But you can see a little bit different. So you could see how, with enough research, you could probably sort some of the wall murals into different categories. And they've pretty much found the things to look for in the Rufus Porter murals, so they're able to identify him. There are other muralists they'll never be able to identify. They don't even know what they did, who did them. And there's no clues as to who did it, so they'll never discover that. So, as I said, by the end of the 1840s into the 1850s, the decorated walls kind of went away. It was out of style, out of fashion. Other things, wallpaper was cheaper. As I said, his inventive mind went on probably for more than 1,000 different ideas and patterns. One he kept coming back to, and this is one where he had an idea. This goes back to the early Billerica days. Was he's always looking for a way to propel things, methods of propulsion. And one of them he kept coming back to was horses. And basically on the bottom here you see it's basically a one horsepower motor, literally. And you can see on the top he kind of fantasizes about being able to put out enough power with this mechanism to be able to move a house. And as we know from living in Billerica, a lot of houses got moved in those days, more than you'd ever think. And so, I mean, that wasn't necessarily a bizarre idea. It became an easier way of doing something that was fairly commonplace. So around 1840, he left Billerica, but his wife and his children stayed in Billerica. And he went to New York, and he bounced back and forth between one of his sons was living in Connecticut at the time, and he was always inventing, submitting patents, going to meet with people who might be able to buy his ideas, which some of them probably did. And but the publishing world, he really got into the heart of the publishing world in New York. And he published a lot of books, and he always published instructional books, or he called them scientific books. But in 1847, he came out with the Scientific American, which is still being published today. And that was invented, you'll say, by Rufus Porter. And in it, he gave the instructions for painting murals on your wall if you wanted to do it yourself. His wife stayed in Billerica, and that's his son, and his son, Stephen T. Trombley Porter, both passed away while they lived in Billerica. This is his son's grave marker, 1850. These are in the South Cemetery down on Concord Road near French Street. And if you go to look for them, if you know where the Howe Monument is, you kind of go down further back to the woods from that, and they're on the right-hand side. And they're probably some of the best preserved, the best in best condition markers that you'll find in the cemetery there. This is Eunice, that's his wife, died in 1848. And I'm not, looking at this overall, how important, he was really important. He was like a Elon Musk in the 20s, 30s, and 40s in the 19th century. And then he totally fell out of favor. When he went into the publishing, it's kind of like he disappeared. It kind of fell off the face of the earth, except for the people that were in his immediate circle and his children. But then there was a resurgence in the 60s, thanks to the book that came out about him, Gene Lipton and Lipman, and brought back interest in him. And that interest still survives today. It's still mentioned in a lot of decorating magazine articles and whatnot on Rufus. So it's kind of nice to see him. And I kind of understood why the town has never kind of latched onto that and kind of promoted that more, because at one point he was one of the most well-known people in the world, basically. And he was like a Benjamin Franklin type of person, except without the political background. But his inventions and whatnot were just, kind of crazy. This I did about 20 years ago. That's in the living room of my house. So I guess I was inspired. And there's another one there I did in the bedroom. And I like to do some of these smaller ones. And even at the gift shop over at the Saxton House and the gift shop there, I donated some gift cards and some prints and whatnot of some of these things that I've done. Rufus, like I said, he stayed in New York and he kept in touch with his son. He actually died at his son's house in 1894. He was 94 years old. And by that time, in 84, he was very obscure. If you mention his name, hardly anywhere, nobody would know him. Where just 50 years earlier, everybody knew who Rufus Porter was. So I find him to be a very interesting, intriguing person. The way that the connection that the town has with him is probably as good or better than any other place he ever lived. And I'll say even Bridgeton, Maine. I mean, he just was born there and he did very little except go to school, and he left there to seek a life. And part of his life, 20 years of his life, was spent here in town. So it's kind of interesting as you drive through town, you can kind of wonder. I wonder if Rufus was here. Rufus would know that. Oh, another interesting thing, he actually worked for the town of Billerica. He had a job for the town painting guideposts, which we know as street signs. And so he painted the street signs. And he always did this bespoke kind of work. If he had a wagon, a carriage, we have the old sleigh at the barn. I forget the date of it, but I often wonder if that fits in the right date. It could have been, and it probably was done by Rufus Porter, because that's the type of work that he would do freehand. And he did that even going back to the days in Portland. But yeah, he was quite a man, and I think the town's missing the boat with not promoting Rufus a little more than they do. If you can remember this, going up to New Hampshire when the old man on the mountain lost his face, they had to change all their signs, "Welcome to New Hampshire." Well, when the first ones they did it with it was like a village, a colonial village, but it was obviously a takeoff on Rufus Porter. It was a stenciled village, and he actually had done that. It said "Welcome to New Hampshire" and they've since changed it again. But Billerica should do something like that too, as well, just to keep his memory going and make people aware of the importance. You could arguably say he was one of the most well-known people who was a citizen of the town of Billerica.
That wraps up the meeting.
Motion to adjourn?
The second.
All in favor?
Aye.